Hello, this is Gmodism here once again with a not so light, philosophical little wanderings or excursions. And well, I hope you will be interested in enjoying this little video, and maybe you have some own thoughts you can share in the comments about this topic. But anyways, consciousness and the existence of God or gods is today's topic. And I've thought in some different ways, and I've come to the conclusion that seems most reasonable to me. When we try to explain consciousness, it gets very complex, because where does my consciousness start? Where does it end? Where does your consciousness start? And where does that end? Yeah, it's a hard question. And if we go to some maybe we could say Abrahamic ways of thinking, we have in the theory of creation, or the Genesis, we have God creates the entire world by sound, basically. And also God makes humans as an image of himself, basically, and also all the animals to benefit the humans or the world in his creation. So in this theory, humans have a privileged spot in the creation as something more complex. And well, as humans, of everything we have encountered so far, the human brain is the most advanced and intricate and hard to understand structure that exists. We don't know anything more advanced than the human brains. It's too advanced for us to understand. And this gives some kind of backup to this theory. However, when being with animals, I think I can feel and understand their consciousness. I believe that as well as humans have consciousness, animals have the same. Because, with other mammals, you can communicate them, you can look at them, you can understand how they think, you can almost pretend you are that creature and imagine how life would be. You wouldn't have so many thoughts, but it's alive. And I believe that animals are conscious as well. And yeah, you can have different ideas about the Abrahamic religions as well, because it's hard to know how many stories were put together to form the books that are used in these religions, of course. But I'm not so well read or perhaps interested, so I will not further dive deeper in that aspect in this video. However, I will go further from here with the theory that we humans are conscious and all animals are conscious. All mammals, reptilians, reptiles, and maybe reptilians as well, are conscious. And I also believe that insects are conscious on a level. But now what comes to an interesting question. If all of these very complex animals have consciousness, is there something that lives that doesn't have consciousness? Is a tree conscious? Is it self-aware? Maybe self-aware is disputable. I don't know. But I believe in some sense that also a tree is self-aware and it has some kind of consciousness. I believe that everything that lives are conscious, because otherwise you can't draw a line anywhere. It's kind of we have creatures that are existing in all different levels, from very simple to very advanced. Now, personally, I believe that the evolution theory seems reasonable. However, one should know that we haven't proved the theory. Evolution is still a theory, and it's likely, but we do not know that evolution is a thing. We know that microevolution is a thing because it has been observed. But the whole theory of evolution is a theory, and maybe we will be able to prove that sometime in the future. But anyways, if we assume that the theory of evolution is fact, and we have really simple beings in the primordial something soup of Earth, basically, or the chemicals are floating around in the ocean, and the volcanic vents in the bottom of the ocean causes new life chemicals, and we have some lightning strikes and all of that, and it can form the molecule for life. It can form those molecules. And let's assume that that was how the first, most basic way of life was formed. And from that, the different stages of life were created. And then we have the question, where did consciousness start? We don't know. Is it this most simple life? If it's the most simple life form, it's very simple. It's only a few proteins, it's not that complex. But if we assume that the first life is that, then it comes to the question, where does consciousness start and where does it end? This being, is it a conscious entity as soon as it is formed? A cell or something? Is that conscious? And if I'm built up of cells, are all cells in me also self-aware? And we have 100 times more bacteria in our bodies than human cells. Are those in my stomach, are those self-aware? Or is everything part of the same awareness? I'd say it's a little bit of both. Because I think that in the same way that the most simple particle can be self-conscious, you could say that the interaction of the molecules before the life form, the very simple cell is formed, is also a kind of life. It's an exchange of matter, it's an exchange of energies. And I believe that's something fundamental to life. So because we can't draw the line, I believe that everything in the entire world, everything, is conscious and self-aware, because there is no other reasonable explanation. To me, I haven't come across another explanation yet, so this is my current theory. Everything is conscious. If we can't draw the line, a rock may also be conscious and self-aware, in a sense. But you must understand that we have this immense brain. And as the same way that animals don't think as complex thoughts as you and I do, the same way a rock, for example, is a very stable, usually if it's not radioactive, it's a very stable thing. And it doesn't really think. But it's still, in a sense, self-aware. But it's not the rock itself, it's everything. I believe that everything is the same consciousness. And of course, a rock, I guess, wouldn't care if you crush it. you know, it's aware, but it's just spread out. It's no difference. However, you and me, we have this urge to continue living and thrive. So we wouldn't want to be crushed. Would you want to be crushed? I wouldn't. So if I crush a rock, I don't think it will be caring very much. If I crush someone, you or something, that's very horrible. You know, you wouldn't like that. The person that gets destroyed doesn't like that, because we have a preservation thing of life. We want to continue living because that's how our energy system exchange works. We have to reproduce to be able to close the circle. So, even though everything is the same consciousness, I believe that somehow, in at least decently advanced life forms, there is a point of attention somehow that's trapped. So that this point of attention has home base. I'm the home base for a point of attention. And I believe that this point of attention kind of gets trapped in the energy exchange circle until we die. Then it's released and part of the rest of the consciousness. And it's hard to define the size and scale or level of this point of attention. But, you know, if everything were not self-aware and conscious, where would we get consciousness from? And I have no answer. Either we get consciousness and self-awareness from anything, because everything we know, all matter at least, all matter and light probably, because it's hard to draw the line between them. Everything of these is in some way self-aware and conscious. Or, this is another theory, that consciousness would be granted from an all-powerful God to each and every complex life form. But if this were the case, it would be hard to draw the line between who gets consciousness and self-awareness and who does not get it. What's the difference between two immeasurably similar electrons, you know? One is in my brain and contributing to a really complex thought pattern, and the other is just circling around a piece of uranium in a rock somewhere 100 kilometers below. I don't know. And that's why I, at least, in this point of time, you know, I can have new thoughts in the future. This is not set in stone. But from what I can observe and understand now, I believe that everything has consciousness and is self-aware. But it doesn't mean that it thinks the same way you and I think. We can't understand how, say, something so much more simple than us would think, and we can't understand how something so much more complex than us would understand. You might think of it, you could say that planet Earth is a life, that it lives, that it has a self-consciousness. And maybe consciousness is based on the structure where you defined it. So on the level, on the cell in my finger, this cell will believe it's self-conscious because it's only limited. But Earth, for example, on the scale of the Earth, if you define Earth, the Earth itself will be self-conscious, and everything on Earth, including you and me, is part of this consciousness. But we, as a vessel on this Earth, doesn't understand the consciousness of the Earth. It's far too complex. In the same way, the cell in our finger also has the consciousness, but it doesn't understand if you define it as you or me, you know. It doesn't understand that scale. Maybe that's the current explanation, I believe. Yeah. So I think it kind of makes sense, and if you have another idea, please post it in the comments with some arguments for that. It would be interesting to hear another viewpoints, or several other viewpoints. But anyways, that everything is self-conscious and self-aware in a sense, dependent on the point of attention or the defined scale. This, I think, makes some good sense. But yeah, I hope that you have enjoyed listening to this theory, and I also hope that you will continue to like future videos and post what you think. Because I don't know, but this is my theory. I think it makes sense, but I don't know. I might change my mind in the future. But anyways, thank you very much for watching. This is Gmodism, signing out. See you next time.